kings, we stay on top.
I read a thing about Bartolo Colon. Whoa.
We pushing live streams, no delay in our grind. Platinum service on our mind, views always on the climb. Shout out to the streamers, we switching up the game. Go Live Vegas, remember the name. Spotlight on every show, we bring that Vegas heat. 777 on the logo, our hustle's never discreet. Dropping content non-stop, setting trends, we never flop. When it comes to streaming kings, we stay on top. Sheesh.
Like half an hour before each Monday to tell people to watch for it. So I posted today Instagram.
Broadcast the rhythm.
Go live, Vegas on the screen, feeling the flow, so pristine. Boom, as the beats align, electric dreams, they intertwine.
If you see my munchkin get out of the car, let me know. He's sleeping. Yeah, that's why it's running. Yeah. So, I mean, it's good. We're already at 4 live viewers. That's in there. All right.
All right. Whoa. Okay, then. Off and running on a Monday, and we're loud at that. Hot mics, baby. We are ready to go after a couple of weeks off. Back in action right here from the Go Live Vegas studio. It is the Game Day Huddle. Brett Lawson, Steve Johnson, Jimmy Garino. The gang is all here. Aaron behind the boards as always. And fellas, obviously plenty to talk about today. It's one of the best time of the year in the sports world. Steve, really quick, you had something. You were chomping at the bit.
I got a quick message from our co-host on Who the Gets Frank, Brendan Allen, who tunes in and watches the program on a regular basis.
Friend of the show.
And
we love Brendan.
Hated Giants fan. But anyways, he messaged and said he could hear us talking during the intro. So
I love it. Hot mics, baby.
So whatever I just said there, that's great.
Hot mics. It was, hey, it's Vegas. It's summer. The temperature's hot. The mics are even hotter as we are off and running. Thank you, Brendan, for tuning in. And for anyone tuning in, we appreciate you on all of our social media platforms, YouTube, Spotify, and everything in between. We thank you. And guys, we have an NBA Finals set. And it seems like last time we were on air, we were just previewing how we were going to get there with the Eastern and Western Conference Finals. We will recap those briefly while also briefly looking ahead of what we have. But just to start right off the bat, Oklahoma City and Indiana. Not exactly a big needle mover in terms of the markets. Little Midwest action, maybe not exactly ideal.
It should, though.
Right, and maybe not ideal for the brass as far as the upper echelon in the NBA, Adam Silver and company, as far as the mainstream appeal, right? The casual influence. Obviously, you want those big markets into it because that often sways, those casual middle pack if you will. But what it may lack in flash, all the substance is there. And really the lack of flash is simply just in the two markets. The teams themselves, the organizations, certainly do not lack the flash. In fact, Pacers and Thunder, the way it's all shaped out, could be the most intriguing matchup we could have possibly gotten. But before we get there, we have to break down exactly how we got to this point. Let's start in the East, guys. Pacers topping the Knicks in 6. They advanced to the first final since 2000, where they last beat, you guessed it, the New York Knicks in Game 6. And Jimmy, as Knicks fans, it started rough, got a little better, then got rough again, then got, it seemed like, way better, and then the inevitable eventually sunk in. Ultimately, the better team won here. I don't think it's any mystery. I don't think it's any shock. Obviously, today, naturally, in the sports media world, we're going to dissect, we're going to nitpick everything that went wrong for the Knicks, while also doubling down on everything that went right for Indiana. But just right off the bat, what's your biggest takeaway from what we saw in this series regarding both teams, the winner and even the loser?
My take is Halliburton is the man.
Okay.
He is the guy. He's going to carry that team as far as they can go. As far as Brunson and Big Cat, that's it. You need 3 to win. Right. That's one thing about in the league this year that everybody's always has said for the last 15 years. You need 3 stars to win. And I think the Knicks have 2 with Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns.
Yeah.
And I think they're missing that third big piece.
And that's kind of the story of the whole series, because even when we talked about it, Steve, OG Anunoby was stellar at times. Mikal Bridges, stellar at times. Mitchell Robinson, even in Game 6 alone, off the glass, dominating with the offensive boards. But there was always that lack of, like Jimmy just said, a third score. And even at times when you had your 2 studs in Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson, when one of them would disappear, you saw the entire offense kind of slow down a bit. And by the end of it all, in Game 6, we saw both of those players pretty much run out of gas. Now, they're nowhere near the Eastern Conference Finals without Jalen Brunson. And Karl Anthony Towns, say what you want, little erratic, sloppy with the fouls. The defensive, we've always known about his defensive issues, but with his 3-point shooting and his ability to score, he's a big reason why they were able to create the situation to go to a Game 6, especially with what we saw from him in Game 3. So even through all the flaws of Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, when they needed to be better, them being as good as they were all year long got the Knicks to this point. That's why I refuse to look at this, Steve, as what the Knicks did wrong, because they just lost to an outright better team and a team that plays team basketball. It's the pacing, it's the ball movement of Indiana. It's Halliburton, as Jimmy just said, obviously, but Pascal Siakam, right? Toppin, all these guys. Nesmith, incredible, dropping down threes, clutch threes when they needed to. And ever since that Game 1 meltdown for New York, it was just an upstream swim.
Well, and, it's funny. You look at this Pacers team, and the one thing I see a big difference on is the guys with playoff experience.
Right.
Right? Because you just mentioned those guys. Like, first off, you mentioned Obi Toppin. He came from New York.
Yeah.
Right? Then you talk about Pascal Siakam. Been there, done that.
That
right?
was a crucial part of the championship
times.
Team. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, he became the MVP, which, by the way, was an interesting moment because
with Halliburton
was kind of like, yeah, it's me, and it wasn't.
He started walking out. Yeah, I saw
which
that.
I don't know if that's good or bad for the NBA.
Right.
It probably should have been Halliburton.
Right. It's probably ideal that you get that star that Jimmy just emphasized, that future, because that was really the story of the Final Four, right? Anthony Walker, SGA, Halliburton, Jalen Brunson. It was almost this changing of the guard type of feel, right?
And so you have that from that standpoint of, those type players, and that was a big difference in this series. Was guys that had playoff experience, guys that have been there, guys that have rings, right? The Pacers, when they built this team to win the Eastern Conference.
Yes.
They built this team worried about the Eastern Conference, right? And if you need any indication to know that they built this team to win the Eastern Conference, is that Oklahoma City is a 750 dog at the book right now.
Yep, and exactly.
Right? And
you have Indiana coming back as or OKC is a 700 favorite. Indiana coming back as a plus 500 dog. Could even get up, as Steve said, as far up as 750 to coming back at plus 520. There's a little bit of variation, but that's stark. That tells you a lot. And the bookies are always going to tell you everything you need to know beforehand.
When you look at the depth, of this Oklahoma team, and look, I've been standing on the mountaintop since before the All-Star break about this, saying this team is going to be the team out of the West. Right, I was wrong in the East, right? The team I thought it should have been with the Cavaliers, but Oklahoma City was the team, in my mind, that starting the season was the team that was going to win it.
Right.
And I believe the best team in the Western Conference is representing the Western Conference.
And I think you're spot on as we kind of, because we'll do a rough preview here. We'll be on the air in the immediate aftermath because are we going to be, I don't know if it's official first Friday, or do we get the green light for coverage of that? Or, because if so,
I believe so at this point, but we'll
find
see where
out.
we're at.
We'll let you know. We'll promote on social media. Just the only reason I say that, we may be on the air even sooner than next Monday, so there'll be a lot to recap as this thing gets going. What I believe Thursday is when the tip-off comes.
We should have 2 games in before we come back next Monday.
So we'll give our kind of our early preview. But looking at OKC and how they got there, hindsight is 20/20. I get it. Did we maybe, not necessarily when I say we, collectively us, or like rather us three at the desk, but collectively across the board in the sports community, did we get a little too excited about Minnesota? Because as we saw, Knicks, Pacers, there were at least elements of New York that matched up with Indiana. Indiana was just collectively a much better team, the way they distribute the ball, knock down their threes, and like Steve said, the experience. The Knicks just weren't there. And plus, Tom Thibodeau, say what you want. I think they're a big reason why the Knicks have kind of turned the page is because of him. But Tom Thibodeau is going to be Tom Thibodeau. So we could talk about his shortcomings till we're blue in the face. But Thunder and OKC and Minnesota, Jimmy, that was never close. At least in the East, you thought, all right, maybe the Knicks get the Pacers on the ropes a little bit here. That was just an outright ass whooping. And it was because, again, talking about team basketball, I think we were so enamored by the on-paper roster in Minnesota, we forgot that essentially, again, not necessarily us three, but we forgot to emphasize that Minnesota plays one-on-one ISO-style ball. That's not going to work against an absolute offensive juggernaut like the Thunder, who have the MVP of all people spearheading it.
Yeah, that Thunder team is just so deep. Everywhere
Scary.
you look down there, there's 8 or 9 players on that team that all contribute. And that's one of the good things for OKC, and that's the reason why throughout the whole year they were just murdering everybody. Even every game you looked at, they were up 17, 20 points. You're like, how is this team constantly doing this? Yeah. Well, and they run 8 to 9 deep on the bench every single time. The guys go in there and they just keep getting better.
Yeah.
So that this Oklahoma City team is they're going to run away with this championship.
Yeah. So,
it's going to be maybe 5 games if they're lucky.
And I was going to ask that next because, like Steve said, if there was one team maybe to match up with their style of play, right? The explosiveness offensively, the ability to score, to transition. We know what Indiana could be on fast breaks. We know what how they could capitalize off the turnover, and we know how they like to spread the rock around. Oklahoma City, though, probably does all those things even better. So now with the shortcoming, Steve, that the Knicks had against the Pacers, you have to wonder if the Pacers, despite that being their MO, if they suffer a shortcoming against a team who does the exact same thing, but maybe at a little higher level than they do.
You want to bet that you should probably put money into? And
Talk
that bet, what I would do is go put money on Williams winning the MVP. Because what's going to happen is that they're going to try to shut down Shai. And when they go and try to shut down Shai, that dude's going to be wide open, have tons of spacing. And when Shai's not on the court, he's just a shadow of him. He's not far off.
He's like a different version, or the same version, maybe just a slight tick above.
Plays defense, very physical, can drive, also can shoot from outside. He dishes the ball well. He creates his own shots. Like, he has all of those things that you need, and he's a young player, right? Kind of reminds me, I don't think this is fair, but if you think of when you had the changing of the guard in San Antonio where Kawhi took over in that series,
2014.
you could see something similar to this and be like, oh my gosh, this guy is actually like really good. And then on top of it, you have now a healthy, and I'm going to call him chippy, Chet Holmgren.
That's what I was going to bring up next. He may be the X factor, and he almost, I know we're talking about him a lot, right? Highly touted prospect, went to a good team, was in a good system. I don't know, Steve, if we're still giving Chet the credit he deserves.
No, I think that he is a big changer for them.
Yeah.
He gives them time. And that's when a guy can take a break on the bench and miss another 4 possessions before they bring him in because of a guy like him. Because he's big, he's athletic, he moves around, which moves their big men around, and then puts mismatches on the floor. That's Oklahoma City creates all these mismatch opportunities, all these crazy opportunities because of the fact that they're able to create that spacing, and then they have all those intermoving parts. And then when you start looking in the depth like you're talking about, and you start looking down that roster, you start realizing that there's guys out there that are 10-point guys, and there's a lot of them. Right?
And that's the key.
And that's massive.
It's a tool belt.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when you can
Utility
move
belt.
on and you got a guy that, look, Shai doesn't have to have the highest scoring night if the other pieces fall in place, right? And a lot of teams don't have that ability.
Yeah.
What the Pacers, the only way I see the Pacers winning games in this series is if they can keep Shai under 30.
And I also think that the Thunder are in a position where SGA doesn't necessarily have to be brilliant. Has to be good, but doesn't have to be all-time brilliant. I think Halliburton has to be brilliant if the Pacers are going to win this.
100%.
Yeah, and I know that seems like a lukewarm take, but it kind of goes understated because we put so much attention on the Pacers and their ability to play team basketball, and we saw that come into effect, right? But at the same time, it was all through, like Jimmy just said, through Halliburton. With Siakam, whether he should have won the award or not, you have Halliburton thinking it was him. Maybe it should have gone to Halliburton. It's a good story for Siakam. The straw that stirs the drink is Tyrese. And really quick, though, Michael Lugo brings it up. Chet gave a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year the work inside and outside of the paint. Who can guard him on Indy? I mean, it's a matchup problem.
Sabonis doesn't cut it with him because he can't cover him outside of the key.
Especially now, and that's what's so interesting. And Lugo also mentioned how Edwards needs help at this point, and it's true. Like at this point, I think Anthony Edwards, is he the face of the game? Is he the face of the league? Let's just pump the brakes on that. We need to see what Minnesota truly can be. This was just a preview. So I think Minnesota, it's more of a look, more of a preview of things to come. I think New York, it's reflective of a good team that needs to make major moves. Lugo also mentioned in the comments how it could be a great opportunity to move off of Towns and bring in Antetokounmpo. We know the Greek Freak sweepstakes are going to heat up. I don't necessarily know if he ends up in New York, but he is going to be in the conversation.
I just don't see the Knicks dumping that contract at this point.
And neither do I. And obviously, say what you want about the Knicks putting themselves in a bit of a jam with the Bridges deal. I get it. But the Knicks have done a lot of things right in a short amount of time. It's like what Jimmy said. They just need one more key piece. And sure, maybe you move off of Towns and maybe you do bring in Giannis. I don't know if that automatically gets them ready to be in the finals based off of what we've seen and based off of what we could potentially see. But really quick, looking at this match, because you kind of hesitated there about Halliburton and Siakam. Is there like an additional thought you have there?
Well, the thing is that Siakam is a very good player.
Yeah.
And he seems to elevate his game when it matters more.
Yeah.
Right?
Clutch
So
player.
he's not a weekly player. He's the guy that shows up in the big games. He's there every Friday night. He's the guy that makes that move. He puts himself in that spot. And it's funny because Pascal Siakam, Jimmy, is not the name that we talk about out of 100 players in the Eastern Conference.
Right, absolutely.
But he's a guy that his numbers and what he's done kind of stands up there a little bit.
Yeah, he's averaging 22. If you're averaging 22 in the NBA, like, you're not just a player. You're one of the best players
You're a force.
in the league.
Yeah.
So he is one of the best players in the league, but nobody's talking about him.
So, and let me ask you that. Is there, before we get into because I think we're all going to be collective, even like Lugo said in the comments, and if you want to join on the conversation, we want to hear from you as well. Give us your pick, your prediction, any takes you may have. Let us know in the comments. The phone lines are open. We want you to be involved in the discussion. But he says OKC in 6. I think it probably at least goes 6. I know you said 5, Jimmy. I feel no matter what Indiana does, OKC is always going to be a step ahead because it's anything you can do, we can do better. And I just think even if Toppin and Neesmith and these guys do drop down threes and they do have this collective great effort again, you are going to have to do that night in and night out. And it's just so hard for me to imagine there being an element of doubt for OKC. But before we get into our, once and for all final picks, before we go to break, do either of you two see a particular card, a particular player that's about to blow up? Is there a kind of a resurgence for Siakam? Is it more about a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Tyrese Halliburton because we like our stars, especially in the finals, when a lot of casuals may be watching, even in a year where it's not necessarily a sexy matchup? Do you see anybody coming out of the blue? Do you see anybody on the radar who's about to blow up even more? What's your gauge?
The only one that you can really go after is Siakam's. Everyone else has already kind of hit their peak, especially at the start of the playoffs with everything, how everybody was playing so well and the stars were playing so well. I think Siakam's way down. I think you get him for fairly cheap right now. If he goes out and wins, for some reason, if they come back and they win this game,
right,
or win the series,
He'll be Nick Foles.
And he hits the MVP or his cards will go crazy.
Yeah.
Because they're so low right now, and it doesn't take much to buy a card for $60 and it sells for $150. Now you're getting 3 extra money.
It's a big rub.
It's a big run.
Yeah.
And it's possible that it could happen only if he wins, though. Only if he wins.
And again, when I made that statement of then now all of a sudden he's Nick Foles. That's exactly it. When Nick Foles went into that playoffs with the Eagles, Nick Foles was free.
Yeah.
You literally could buy his best stuff for under $50. And now, once he won, there was this huge
Influx,
boom,
yes.
right?
And that's so funny because we have the misconception, like that 2017 squad, it's not like it was Nick Foles leading them there. Carson Wentz was having an MVP type year, and in the few games Nick Foles did play in the regular season, very pedestrian. The first playoff game, very pedestrian. It wasn't until the divisional game where they took off, and he essentially had 3 great games: divisional round, conference championship, and the Super Bowl. But look what it did. Sometimes that's all it needs, and especially now, NBA is one of those sports where a lot of people aren't going to watch it from the casual standpoint. Aren't going to watch it till we get exactly where we are now. So a lot of these guys are going to see Siakam, Halliburton do things that they didn't see against New York.
Well, what they're going to see, too, is
Yeah.
they're going to see them talk about Siakam. And you got to remember, Siakam, he's not a lifelong pacer, right? He was on that Toronto team.
Yeah.
That
right?
won a championship.
That won a championship.
Battle
so
tested.
what is going to be happening? They're going to be talking about Siakam being the MVP of the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yep.
They're going to start talking about him making his appearances and the rings that he's won and the different teams he's played with, right? And they're going to point out that he's been an X factor all the time. And now all of a sudden, and look, he's not Ray Allen, but this is a good comparison to what Ray Allen became
As far as the
with
importance.
the rest of those guys, because obviously Garnett and Pierce, those were the guys, and then Ray Allen was the other guy,
cherry on
But-
top.
But Ray Allen is icing games. Ray Allen is shutting it
Yeah.
down. Ray Allen is bringing them back in the game.
And we saw with Miami. I mean, the Miami had their own big three. Ray Allen was a part of a big three in Boston, then goes to Miami, joins another big three in the Heatles, and literally wins them maybe the most iconic Game 6 against San Antonio that year you'll ever see.
Exactly.
Right.
And so when you have those type scenarios, the one guy that I would pinpoint, and I know Jimmy's saying that most of those guys are pretty high, I still think Williams is undervalued. I still think that he's a player that you can buy. Now, you're not going to 2.5x him. You're not going to do those things. But to get a 15 or 20% bump, that if he goes off over the next week and a half, that if you bought cards today or tomorrow of him and turned around and a week from now he's, averaging 22, 23 like he did in the playoffs so far, and now it's on a bigger viewpoint. Everybody's watching. Look, Jimmy doesn't watch basketball until the tip-off happens on Thursday, right?
That's it.
So once you know that casual fan in the
Right.
NBA is now watching, I think you get to see this guy, and that's exactly what happened with Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah.
Kawhi Leonard
Coming out
was
party.
a pedestrian as far as you viewing the traffic until he got into the NBA Finals, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait, this guy can drive, this guy can play defense, this guy can shoot, this guy can distribute the rock. Wait, whoa, what?
I mean,
Where did this come from?
I could imagine
It's been there all year.
I can imagine Dirk Nowitzki is an iconic, generational great, one of the best to ever play his position, literally a legend of basketball. But I could see where, even though that was already known, just him winning with the Mavericks that one year probably did absolute wonders. Like, there's that championship element in a sport where a lot of people are only going to know what you've done insanely recently, and sometimes that's not even enough either, so you have to impress them in the immediate moment. The question is, who is going to impress in this immediate moment as these two teams are set to go down? Jimmy,
Real
you got
fast.
something?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I just pulled up the Prism 2016-17 Prism rookie Pascal Siakam auto rookie card. Give me a guess. It sold for 8 days ago.
$75.
What do you think, Brett? I know you're not the
I'm not-
the card expert, but
Yeah.
But it says rookie auto.
Right.
rookie auto. It sold for $58.
I was going to guess
Wow.
like 80.
So
yeah, 85.
$58. You're
Yeah.
telling me that if this guy goes out and wins an MVP of the championship, that card I guarantee sells for over $150.
That card's going to go up just because they're going to talk about him before tip-off.
Because
Correct.
of how much of a factor
So I'm
he
going to
is.
monitor this card, and we'll talk about it in 2 weeks
Yeah.
when
'Cause
the
he's-
series is all over, and we'll see where it's at.
And
Is
I'm
there
happy-
any available to
I'm
buy
happy
right
you did
now?
that.
Let me look.
Because he's a hero that we've seen most recently, and also, despite Kawhi Leonard being the key to that Raptor team, was a hero for another team. So even
Yeah.
if you haven't watched basketball that regularly since 2019, if you have a decent enough memory, you're going to remember him. So I think it's those are great insights. Those insights are why shows like this exist. And again, you see Michael Lugo jumping in the comments, friend of the show. You can do the same. Jump on the text line 702 329-6947 if you want to chime in as well. Sorry, Aaron, I don't have the number memorized exactly down just yet. But, Steve, really quick before we get our predictions for how it's kind of open up with the early games as the whole series is about to tip off in a couple of days, you just said at the top of the segment how, again, not a lot of flash in the markets, but a lot of substance with the teams. A lot of us from a business standpoint are going to hang on the fact that this is going to hurt the league, but it seems like before we got into the nuts and bolts of the conversation, you said it may be the best case scenario of a matchup that could happen.
No, for sure, because I believe that these are two of the more entertaining teams to watch.
Yeah.
And for people that like to watch basketball, this is going to be fun.
It's fan-friendly.
Right? And so when you have that, sometimes those matchups surprise you, right? I'll tell you right now, go back, and now I'm showing my age a little bit here. Go into those, the Earthquake World Series, and prior and after that, right? The A's Reds matchups, right? Those teams at the time, they had great players, and obviously the A's had the Bash Brothers, right? And they had that whole star power. But when you got to the Reds weren't necessarily super flashy. The Reds were just really good with good pitching.
Meat and potatoes.
Right?
Yeah.
So what you did was you put some of the best late inning arms up against some of the best hitters in the AL against each other, and that happened. And now I look at this matchup and I go, look, both teams generally play pretty good defense.
Yeah.
Both teams move quickly. They're not afraid to run the ball. There's a lot of alley-oops. There's a lot of stuff like that with these teams, right? And they both shoot the three, and if they're both on shooting the three, we could see a 140, 136 game.
And they will push the
right?
shot clock. Like
Exactly.
you can't blink. You have
Right.
to stay invested on an entire possession, an entire sequence for both these offenses.
And then both teams are good at pick and rolls. In fact, I would argue that the Pacers might even have
that could be their edge.
But that could be their edge
Yes.
if I was to give them one.
Yes.
Because their role players probably pick and roll better than anyone else's benches, right? So when you start looking at these little things, but what we want is flash. And what I think the NBA would be really smart to do
Sells.
is to show these guys knocking out the monsters in their league, right? LeBron goes down to these guys. Oklahoma City takes down these guys. Now they match up here.
Anthony
now they
Edwards,
take down the Anthony Edwards. Jalen Brunson goes down. Right. And if they show like, hey, these are the faces
The giant
who
killers.
couldn't get here.
Yeah.
Right. David's made it, and it just happens to be that David took out both the Goliaths, and both Davids are playing.
That's
each
a
other.
good point, and I'll say this because one of the biggest complaints about just professional sports, Jimmy, Steve, we talked about this in general, the casual fan so often, at least especially if you're a fan that's not in a big market, you complain that there's not enough representations of middle America, right? The non-coastal cities, those markets that aren't big, that aren't flashy. That's why when Milwaukee, basically a mid-major a few years ago, mid-size, not small, but mid-size, that was such a big deal, right? And if we have a year now where you have two great teams who are there simply because of that, not because they have the most money, not because they're the most appealing as a city, simply because they constructed brilliant basketball teams who play great team basketball, that almost helps the league at a time where people are complaining about the reliance on the three ball. People complaining about load management. People complaining about certain teams being able to stack their rosters because they could tap into the luxury tax. All those controversies are null and void with both these teams, and you can't say anything about where they're from because it's Oklahoma City and Indianapolis.
Absolutely. It's a Midwest matchup. Not everybody's going to be watching just because of that. However, I'll tune in, check it out for 5 or 10 minutes, and go back to my Yankees.
I'm
love it,
going to argue with Jimmy. I think more people are going to watch this than you realize, and I actually have an X factor for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know what the X factor is?
No clue.
Pat McAfee.
Oh yeah, he is all over it.
Pat
for sure.
McAfee is an Indianapolis guy,
And he did add a lot of appeal.
Big, and when he went and riled the troops up there, even though they lost a couple games, that is the most viral moment
of this
from
past
that
series.
playoff series,
Hands down.
So because of that,
Hands down.
they are going to ride that. ESPN is going to be all in on the Pat McAfee play.
They already started
right?
this morning. Did you watch any of Pat?
No, but
yeah, he already started this morning.
Right. So because of that, Pat McAfee is going to drive viewers to this, and he's going to drive viewers to this NBA Finals that don't watch basketball
because
he's going to get all the WWE guys to watch it.
McAfee's audience, a lot of them aren't even hardcore sports fans.
They're football and WWE guys.
Yeah.
So he's going to bring in a whole new flavor to watch this, which, Jimmy, as I talk myself through this, because we do this sometimes where we start to have conversations.
We think, wait a minute.
Wait.
Yeah.
There might be room in Shies still, and there might be room because you're going to bring people from the WWE side who have available money to spend on their hobbies. And because Pat McAfee is behind it, you could see them latch on to a Shy, latch on to a Halliburton.
Halliburton's a wrestling
and spend
fan.
more money
He's a wrestling
on that
fan.
stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you could see that happen. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's like an unnatural 15% jump in like Halliburton
Just off of
cards
that.
or in Shy cards just because the eyes that are there are different than the other ones.
And that's a great point because at the end of the day, it all goes back to demographics. McAfee brings in a unique demographic, and one of the most viral, if not the most viral moments of either the Eastern or Western Conference Finals was him giving the business to the New York celebrities in Indiana.
Was so good.
And also the beef with John Cougar Mellencamp.
Yeah.
Like Pat McAfee's beefing with John Mellencamp. What the hell is going on?
Right.
But you know what? That's what type of shows like that, media platforms like that, that's what they can do. Really quick before we go to break, and just for game one, again, tipping off on Thursday, Oklahoma City laying 9 at home. Again, the overall series odds, 700 to coming with Indiana coming back as a 500 favorite. That's stark as it is.
Do you know
But
why
to get
that is?
To lay 9 points on as a home opener, even when you're a much better team, that's very rare.
The reason is because there's no money coming in on the Pacers, and that's just the sports books just trying to hedge their their liabilities,
and they want to get as
right?
much Indiana money
I'll
as
bet
possible.
I'll bet you by tip, that's 10.5.
Yeah.
By tip, just because there's no money coming in on Indianapolis.
And they're gonna make that Thunder line as sexy as they can to bring in bettors because they think, oh, surely Indiana can cover, but if not enough people cover the books, they're not gonna like that.
Your play here is bet Oklahoma in the series, and lay all that juice, and then turn around and bet every single one of these heavy loaded lines
for the dog.
For the dog.
Yeah.
To counter off, whereas normally you'd want to just bet the other side and try to get a little. You're trying to get when right now you said they're at 500 when they tip to 625 or
middle.
something.
Yeah.
You're trying to mid that right there in case worst case scenario you lose your minimum, right?
Risk management.
And at this point, I actually think this might be the better play. And again, look, I'm not a professional sports bettor, so when I'm telling you this,
let's hear. We're all for picks,
but I am a business guy, and I just look at this on the financial, business side. And to me, this is how you're going to hedge that, unless you're just all in on the juice with Oklahoma City.
Right, where you just think they're going to kick ass every game.
Yeah.
And that's my thing. I don't necessarily think every game's going to be a blowout. I just think it's going to be a situation where every game we know who the better team is. And there is a difference between those two things. Every game could be a barn burner finish where Oklahoma City barely gets the win and Indiana covers every single one. Yet through it all, there may be no doubt when it is all said and done. So we like the Thunder. I know a lot of the basketball fan base, the collective, the sports collective, whether they're casual or diehards, they're going to like the Thunder and good reason. But styles make fights, and even though OKC does have the edge in most departments, if there were one team that could at least give them a run for their money in some of those departments, it'd be a team that plays the same type of game as them. Really quick though, I just want to ask this: if we were just a general sports talk show, maybe it's not as important, but I do want to bring this up because Lugo does say in the comments, and we're kind of backtracking here, but do we look at Kawhi different now, and this is especially talk about the card market value, after seeing the success of Fred VanVleet and now Pascal Siakam on these different teams who've had success this year, and now Kawhi is struggling with the Clippers? Do you think that will hurt, maybe not Kawhi's portfolio because his bones are made. He's a generational great, a legend of his own kind. But card market-wise, do you see now the kind of a 180 polarization there?
So, and Jimmy, correct me if I'm wrong here, but when you have a guy that shows that he's not all in, right? That he doesn't care, that he comes off as passive, as a guy that just it doesn't matter to me, right? And look, there was a comment from Shy that I really didn't like after this series, right? And it rolled over where he was kind of you win, you lose, he was real passive about it. Mm-hmm. And then Anthony Edwards did the same thing where they asked him about losing, right? And he's he wasn't upset about it. He was just we'll get better. Yeah. That type thing, which don't get me wrong, he showed his confidence. But what I don't like is when you have a guy like Kawhi, and this is what happened with Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi, because he kind of checked out before he became a Raptor, he pissed the hobby off. guys want you to care.
Correct.
They want you to be pissed off. That's why, and we're going to bring this up in a little bit, but that's why Aaron Judge in Game 2 of this weekend was pissed off coming off the field right on the moment that they cut the cameras over to the Dodger dugout, right? And his face he was furious. He was mad because he doesn't like to lose.
And I was also going to bring this up when we got to the baseball aspect. We could even tease it now. Not only is this, generational, I wouldn't say rivalry, but it could potentially come into that, but this generational dynamic between Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani, that has to help the card market. Not just because they're both statistically beasts and they're the face of the game, but because if we're going to continue to pipe up a late May, early June series between the Yankees and the Dodgers, if we're going to expect a World Series rematch between the Yankees and the Dodgers, the two coastal beasts, right? The fact that these two guys would view each other as rivals, that would have to help, right? I mean, a Magic card is going to be worth that much more because of a Bird card and vice versa, right?
No, yeah, absolutely. Anytime you could get two rivals, and if they're the two top guys in the sports going out at it together, it's huge for the hobby.
Right.
We're going back to like Shy and these guys. So the issue is these guys are all hoopers. These guys all been playing AAU ball together for the last. So this is where we are as basketball players and basketball fans. We're watching these kids not only just for the last 5 years. They've been playing this basketball together for 10 to 15 years, a lot of these guys. They're just hoopers. They go out there and play hoop. They don't care. A lot of these guys don't even have grudges. They're hanging out after the
buddies.
game.
Yeah,
they're shooting the shit, going to the club afterwards. They don't care. It's not like the 90s basketball where you would have never saw Jordan and Kobe
Sworn
hanging
enemy.
out together. You would have never saw that.
Just
ever.
answer this. Who's Bill Lambier right now? I'll wait.
Right. No,
Nobody.
Exactly. There's no badass.
Right.
There's
Anthony
no badass.
Edwards is a hooper.
Yeah.
Right.
He's been playing with Shy for 15 years.
Yeah.
So
There's
what's
no-
it matter? Like they don't care.
There's nothing to enforce because at the end of the day, they all want to see each other eat.
Which-
They may all want to individually win the title, win the awards, win the MVPs, but they all want to have a seat at the table. That's where it's different. Where back in the day, it's like, no, you're not sitting at this table.
Well,
That's
this is why the
difference now.
in-season tournament became more of a pulse check,
Right.
Because it came off as a little more chippy
Of a throwback.
These players are playing guys in their division that they're actually working, and that started to
That's what we
matter.
got to get back to.
Right.
You have to have that rival. You have to have those people that hate each other.
That tension.
Anytime you're watching, even when you go out and watch your kids play, and you see your kids play and it gets their friends out there, and they're like, high-fiving and having a good time. Okay, it's kids. They're playing the game. However, at some point, you have to have it to where I hate you. And I know when I wrestled going up in college and high school, and I would look across at that guy. Yeah, there's a lot of guys that I wrestled multiple times throughout the year, but I would turn that switch and I would think, I hate that guy.
Or if you're
I want to kill that guy.
If you're at a tournament, you know he's in your bracket. You get a little bit of a different mindset.
You turn it on in your head.
And we're fight fans, right? Because I wanted to jump in the
Correct.
combat room before we go to break. There's been some great MMA and boxing bouts between two guys who respect each other, but how many do we really remember? How many all-time great fights that we could look at in both the cage and the ring, where the two guys, even if after the fact they settle their beef, like a Duran and a Leonard,
as they should,
like an Ollie and Frazier, as they should, no doubt about it. But Chael Sonnen and Anderson Silva. But going into the fight, it was toxic, it was brutal, it was vicious,
and
it was
that
ruthless.
sold the fight.
And that's what we want.
McGregor Nurmagomedov is
There
the
you
one
go.
that stands out.
There you go.
That's the one.
And we haven't had one since then.
And the only other time that I can think of teams not really liking each other was that last trip for the 49ers to the Super Bowl. Right?
Against Kansas City?
Right, because they did not like each other, and
Yeah.
it was very chippy leading up. The 2 weeks before was some of the better media, and it wasn't from the big names. That's what was great. It wasn't. It was from the Fred Warners. It was from the guys that were
linebackers, safeties,
right, They were the guys, and then you had the pushing on the field before. You had the kickers jawing at each other. You had all of these things that make that, fight style, for it. Baseball's getting this again, and this is
Finally,
probably the
yeah.
area where baseball's winning right now, is that there are teams and there are players that are just not doing it. And you saw it with the Bryce Harper situation this last week. You've got a few other things like that where teams are really throwing, and you've got legit pitchers throwing at legit hitters.
There's some venom.
It used to be all right, that we'll pitch. We'll hit number 8 in the lineup.
Yeah.
Right. We're gonna hit that guy instead of hitting the Bryce Harpers or hitting the Aaron Judges or whoever's the big guy. Right.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're doing that again, they're pitching inside, like that's happening again. But it's also that change that everyone's throwing 101 now instead of throwing 97.
Yeah.
So that also helps with it too.
You adjust,
Right.
absolutely. But sports is better like that. We go for the drama. We come back for it time and time again, whether we admit it, that we like it or not. At this point, it's easy to admit that we do because, again, there's human interest elements here. There's narratives. There are storylines. And all those things are better when you could add that professional wrestling fuel to the fire. I mean, even Lugo just said in the comments there, imagine if Halliburton, every time he has a big clutch performance or a big play, a big shot, like we saw right in game 1, if he does that choke type of gesture. Like, those are the type of things NBA fans want. Those are the type of things all types of sports fans of all walks of life
That worked
want.
for Steph.
Right.
And who's public enemy number 1 in the NBA right now?
Yeah.
John Morant.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, we know.
Because he talks all kinds of shit now to everybody because he's like, look, I'm not going to be the nice guy persona anymore. I'm going to own it.
And there's a certain gesture where we facepalm every time that he does it and we think, what the hell are you doing? But hey, guess what? It works for the villain role.
There has to be a
works
heel.
for the
Right. There has to be a
Always.
WWE has perfected it. You always have to have a heel in every major sport.
I will tell you,
WWE
and I have
has
said
perfected
this
it.
for years because when we talked about fighting, like, ultimately, there are really no good guys in sports. There are villains in sports, and the good guys are the guy who we say, you're going to be the one to go beat the villain. You're our guy who we're adopting to be our hero. In actuality, there's really no true born hero, but there are born villains.
Well, and if you think of it, go to Golden State, right?
Mm-hmm.
And who's their bad boy?
Draymond.
Okay.
Yep.
Draymond's going to be a free agent this year.
Mm-hmm.
If Draymond ends up on a team like the Timberwolves, that is going to be what the NBA needs.
Feisty.
Because Anthony Edwards is not afraid to say what he thinks, and someone else then would be there to support it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Steph doesn't say what he thinks. Steph, you have no idea what Steph thinks.
Yeah, he's a PR guy. He'll
Right.
hold his tongue, and it works for him. I get
Right.
why Steph does that.
And that's great. But I'm telling you that those type players, those guys like that, when they get paired up with that right chemistry for that, you could have that. This is that rough team. This is the team you don't want to go into
Those
play.
bad boy Pistons.
These are right.
Yeah.
And that's that. The NBA's got to find a way to channel that. They did a little bit with the in-season tournament, and again, I think ultimately this series isn't going to give you that. Right? This series won't. But I do think this series is going to give you a look at what the new superstars look like.
And that's the perfect way to really wrap things up as you go to break, because we had that feeling throughout the two respective conference finals. The two teams that won both and find themselves in the finals are obviously the two best teams. But again, it's a reflection of how things are changing. There's a change in the guard, and the new stars are starting to step out into the forefront. A lot of times that's met with pushback, but it's needed, and it'll be interesting to see when this one's all said and done, regardless how dominant or competitive it may be. It'll be interesting to see what the overall buzz, what the overall pulse is around the league in the aftermath of it, knowing that we are kind of at that point where we can officially turn the page and open up that next chapter. But again, so much to talk about. We got to go to a break. You see Michael Lugo blowing up the comments. You can do the same. We want to hear from you. So like, subscribe, follow us on all our social media platforms to join on the conversation. That will pivot towards hockey. You think with all what we're talking about, all we have is to focus on is the NBA, but that is not the case. We have Stanley Cup action to break down as well. We have a rematch in the finals, so we'll get to it next. Don't go anywhere. It's a Game Day Huddle on a Monday from the Go Live Vegas studio.
Peppermint Patty's the worst. Comic-Con.com, your daily comic convention online. Insightful reviews, previews of the comics, toys, and games you need to know. Delightful chats with luminaries from around the geek spectrum. In print, on video, and everywhere in between. The show never stops on Comic-Con.com.
Come on down to the grill bar. Craft beer's never too far. Like to do every night. Do the crew and get it right. Raise the glass, raise the dew hat. The food, friends are near. Dance around, laugh and play. Voodoo Ball's a place to stay. Swing!
Vegas Studios, a unique multi-camera social media virtual content creators paradise. We offer high-end services using live streaming and film production for your personal or corporate, commercial or event and campaign needs. Pre-record or live stream to your audience on multiple social media platforms simultaneously. Fun and interactive with social media comments, phone lines, live remotes, audio Foley sounds, and Snapchat filters. Be creative, get recognized, and make money. We help you by providing an all in-house production team. Visit our website at golive.vegas.
All right, keeping it rolling here. It's the Game Day Huddle on a Monday. Brett Lawson, Steve Johnson, Jimmy Garino, Aaron Ellikis. The gang is all here, and what a fun, really, first half of the show that was. So much to talk about, and we haven't even gotten to the Stanley Cup Finals yet. Gentlemen, the rematch is set. Florida versus Edmonton. I'm just going to come right off and say it because there are so many there, and it's true. Our own Aaron Ellikis did call it, and in fact, he has a mic ready, so he may have to be joined in on this segment because I know he has some takes, but right off the bat, with all that we could talk about with narratives, even on an NBA Finals that it doesn't have the glamorous cities attached to it, we just did 45 minutes on that alone. Gentlemen, I get that, it's a little bit easier from a mainstream standpoint to talk basketball than it is hockey, but Steve, are you excited about anything in this tournament? Because usually when there's a rematch in a championship setting, I get pretty hyped. And styles make fights. You have the speed of Edmonton, and you have the physicality of Florida, and you have key star players that we've talked about really since the show started and how they could, really impact the card market. But there's just something here that doesn't have me jazzed up for this. I'm going to watch it, and I think at times I will enjoy it just because it's the Stanley Cup. But I don't feel like this Wednesday the puck's going to drop with it on the line. It just doesn't feel that way.
I think you're looking at it backwards because all of the USA is on to Chuck.
Yeah.
Right?
So
that's the way I'm looking at it. So I get involved because otherwise I wouldn't give a shit.
Right. USA versus Canada.
So it's a continuation of what we saw from the four nation.
Yep.
Four nation.
Correct.
Okay.
And when he goes to Canada on their ice, it will probably be louder than the cheers that you'll get for the Edmonton players
when they're actually
right
at Rogers.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that that's going to be great for the sport. And where I think this matchup is, it's pretty simple. What does the Oilers' first line do? And how little time does Tkachuk spend in the penalty box? Because those are the two things. Because if he's in the penalty box the whole series, the Panthers will lose. And if that Edmonton first line is putting up points or at least shots on goal, most casual hockey observers don't understand how important it is to win the shots on goal battle. Because what you're doing is keeping keeping that goalie constantly active, and you're chipping up those defensemen because they're blocking shots, kicking up, whatever it is. That hurts, right? So when you're doing those type things, those will definitely create that. So I think Edmonton's real shot is how well their first line plays. Do they get quality shots off? And if they do, it is going to be very hard for Florida to beat that. However, if Edmonton has to play from behind in this series, Florida will run away with it.
Yeah, because they're built to do just that. Exactly. And Jimmy, I have to ask you, looking at the card market, I guess if there is outside of the international appeal, which in the sport of hockey we always have with the States and Canada, especially this year as we've talked about on the show. But outside of that, if there is one thing you have going for you, it is the star power. And we've talked about how this entire playoffs, you've had Austin Matthews, you've had Jack Eichel, right? They fall by the wayside, but we get some of the best players in the game. I mean, Draisaitl isn't even the best player on his own team, and he has a chance to win a title. McDavid is the generational great. He has a chance to hoist the cup for the first time. Tkachuk has a chance to go back-to-back. Is that, aside from the international aspect, can you see a major surge for a star player on the card market? Because hockey ultimately is more of a niche sport. You're going to have the diehard appeal when it comes to the collectors, right? When it comes to the hobby. So when you have big names like this who have a chance to do something big, is that what you're looking for at this point?
Yeah, there's one option in this Stanley Cup final. It's Connor McDavid.
There you go.
This is the only guy that you're watching. This is the only guy you're worried about. He has to win a cup. If he does not win a cup this year, he does not go down with the Sidney Crosbys. He does not go down with the Ovechkins. He does not go down with Wayne Gretzky. He's nowhere near those guys if he does not hoist a cup. Yep. And if you ask every hockey fan, they'll all tell you the same exact thing. What matters the most to any hockey fan is hoisting the cup. Yep. And if McJesus does not go out and get it done this time, he's going to be a free agent next year. We're going to see where he goes, because I guarantee Edmonton's going to try to get him and sign them and give him the money. But if he can't win there, guess what? They're not. He's done.
Yeah.
And he's going to go elsewhere, and then it's not going to look the same for him. So
I'm going to tell you right now, he's going to be a Golden Knight. And I'm
I
not
would
saying that
love
because
it.
I'm homering it.
Yeah.
I'm saying it because if you look at what they have, what they can move, and what they can get away with, they're one of the teams that can free up a ton of money for a player like that.
And they're already looking to do that because in the immediate aftermath of their departure at the hands of Edmonton, everyone was asking, what do we have to do collectively as an organization? Fans were asking, media was asking it, because that's a stacked team who couldn't put the puck in the net. So they have guys to move if they want to get someone who they can ensure will put the puck in the net. As Lugo chimes in, "Oh, Canada!" I mean, hey, it's gonna be fun. Aaron, though, it's interesting because Jimmy, as you just mentioned, I knew the anthem was coming.
Let's go, baby.
But Jimmy, as you mentioned,
Hey, Aaron, don't get us taken down off platforms because you're playing something that's.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's getting geopolitical up in here. But you know, when you have a matchup like this. And we also have a team who has a chance to go on a little bit of a run here. And, you know, we sometimes we overstate the importance of dynasties, but look at when the Blackhawks were doing their thing, it was fun to watch. When Tampa Bay, when Pittsburgh were doing those things, their thing in more recent times, let alone if you want to go back to, you know, the Red Wings and the Rangers in the 90s, it's better for the game because now you have what we just talked about with basketball, with baseball, with football, that appeal that all casual sports fans look for. Now you have it in hockey. And sometimes parity's good, but sometimes when you don't know who the hell is in it, each, you know, playoff landscape, each Stanley Cup Finals on a year-by-year basis, it gets a little watered down. It's harder to kind of keep track of the continuity. So to have these teams back in the mix again, I do think it's actually very good to have the Canada versus USA aspect. I do think it's very good. I guess the only reason I'm not completely sold on is because part of me wonders if Edmonton is up to the task to match Florida's intensity and physicality, because Edmonton did that against the Knights, the team that pushed them around a few years ago. Edmonton was the bully in that series, but now they're going up against a team, Jimmy, who can bully just about anyone and continues to do that.
Well, I think, you know, the Canadians are soft. They've always been very soft. They haven't won a championship since 1993.
So you as in As is the Canadians, the people, or is it in Montreal? You know,
a little bit of both.
Right.
So I'm gonna, poke the bear here, going in to say that. Listen, it is Florida all the way.
Okay.
Matthew Tkachuk is going to win another cup. Mm-hmm. He's going to hoist it up, and he's going to pound his chest for Team USA and say, "Look, boys, we did it again."
And I think that this is where, look, there's not a lot of great investments in hockey. It's either you get the really young guys right away
at the right time,
and then move them as soon as they boom, or you find someone that becomes a generational player that just gradually builds over time because they don't jump like that.
They stack up.
I will tell you this: Tkachuk hosts this cup again, and against this team, I guarantee you that his stuff is going to jump.
That was going to be my next question.
Because we haven't had an American hockey player that we really, really, really wanted to get behind because the good American players are playing in Canada, right? That's generally where they're at. And so because of that, and it's because those Canadian teams have been drafting a little lower.
And so many of the good American teams have someone from Canada.
Right.
So
and
it's like
so you don't have that guy that is, and he's that closest, it's still, Trey Turner's still Captain America. But I mean, look, it's as close to Captain America as you're going to get. He's the Sam Wilson Captain America, I guess, right?
Not the Steve Rogers, but we're working up.
Right, he's close enough. No, but what I'm saying is that because of that, that will take the casual collector and the casual fan to go out and say, you know what? This guy's won a couple. He's really good I like him. I like it. He's scrappy. He's this. He's that. I'm going to go out and buy something of his. And that person's going to go out and buy something of his. Is just going to pay whatever because they don't care.
Right.
It's more so they're not looking at it from investment. They're looking at it as
FOMO almost.
This is neat.
FOMO.
I like this.
It's like fear of missing out. That's
so it's
really
a good opportunity to maybe grab that stuff. But again, if he doesn't hoist it, you probably don't see that run on him as much. You'll see a little bit, but not as much. Whereas the difference is Jimmy's saying McDavid wins this. You're instantly going to see the biggest cards of McDavid's hit the market that have been hidden for years.
Right.
because these guys are going to go, this is it. There's the moment to sell them.
And I was going to say, I mean, you guys could look at parallels. LeBron winning his first title, right? Peyton Manning winning his first title. I mean, hell, it may be a niche
but there's
market.
a difference on those.
Well, so okay,
and there's a big difference.
Is it because of how deep they were into their careers? When you look at someone like, well, the Peyton wasn't that deep into his career, but some athletes who win their LeBron won the first one. Miami.
LeBron's been in the playoffs forever,
literally every year,
right? So because of that, he's already like on that doorstep.
So it's not as
you need those guys that haven't been on the doorstep that really get that.
Because Peyton and LeBron, I get what you're saying, because even though Peyton and LeBron was big for their resume regarding how they're going to be ranked all time, no one was like not talking about them. They were in the conversation. It was on the radar.
If you want to talk hockey,
right.
Ovechkin was great, but he was not nearly what he was to the hobby until he hoisted that cup in Vegas.
2018.
Yeah.
That's just the facts. And the guy
hockey
was that
fans are
good.
that way, man.
But
Hockey fans
he
are
was
that way.
not near. I mean, his stuff probably almost. I'd have to go back and look, but I would bet you that between that and then the goals scored, he's probably doubled.
So even as we pivot to baseball, someone like an Aaron Judge, who is a Yankee, who's a stud of the game, who's looking like an all-time great, but hasn't won one yet, would it be similar to him? Because it's again a major market, but he's also played in a World Series. He's on the cusp. He has the MVPs. A World Series would be big for his resume, but would it be big for someone like him? His sales, because he's at least in
baseball's a little different.
Is he's in the vicinity of it?
So baseball's different than the other two major sports with basketball and football.
It's because of all the statistics.
Yeah, it's
that's
all
driven?
statistics,
Yeah.
and it's all you don't have to win championships in baseball. Why? Because more often than not, it matters about the pitcher. It doesn't matter, and nobody's buying pitchers.
Mm-hmm.
You could go out and get a Clayton Kershaw, bona fide Hall of Famer, rookie auto for a couple $100. Nobody's
Like
buying
even
pitchers.
Max Scherzer, not that big.
No one cares about pitchers, but guess what? In baseball, that's the only thing that matters. Because if you don't have 2 to 3 huge starters, you're not winning World Series.
Right.
But you can go down as the best hitter. Look at Barry Bonds. How many championships did they win?
There you go. Zilch.
He's the best hitter that we've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go into this and say, in baseball, all you have to do is put up stats.
It's like what gets you in the Hall of Fame. Like
Hockey's totally different.
The riders who vote you in really don't care if you hoist the commissioner's trophy. It's more so just icing on the cake.
Correct.
If you have the stats, that'll kind of drive the point home. So that's interesting. So I liked it. There's a variation in sport in determining how this market will take off. Because
to me, it's simple.
A lot of it's exposure, it seems like.
It's very simple to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, which is you take the 2 major sports, which I would say is baseball and football.
Right.
Right? Basketball is there. It's close, but it's not quite what those others are, right? So you start going down the line to those other sports, and they become a little bit more team required to be able to kind of create movement and jumps.
Yeah.
Whereas NFL, guy makes the playoffs, right? Guy makes the playoffs, that's good enough.
Right.
Right? Like, Joe Burrow didn't take a huge hit on his values because he didn't get to the Super Bowl this year, and he didn't even make the playoffs.
Like, I was gonna say, like someone like a Jared Goff, who's relevant, performing brilliantly, has a contender at least for the most part of the season. He doesn't even get to the NFC Championship, but I assume that Jared Goff's sales, were pretty good.
His stuff
right?
increased for him, but they're
Like-
not nearly as good as some of those other guys because when you get into the bigger sports, it's all about that speculation, right? Everybody wants to speculate because you want to be buying before
it hits.
It pops,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So everybody wants to speculate to it. In the other sports, people are waiting until they've established themselves to be a star
I love
because
that.
it's a little more team oriented.
So you literally hit the nail on the head. So it's proactive versus reactive.
Exactly.
That's exactly what it is, and that is a great way to.
And that's
break
why
it
I
down.
say the NFL and Major League Baseball is what have you done for me lately?
Yep.
And the other ones,
What can you do
are
down the
what
road?
can you do for me long term?
That's so cool, and it makes total sense because of how the sports are perceived.
That's why Shai didn't boom. Shai will now boom,
Because
and
he
Shai
has the
will
MVP.
hold his values up.
Yep.
You could have middle of this year, you could have bought Shai stuff
Yeah.
like relatively cheap in comparison to other players in similar type positions as him.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I would argue that if you went back and you looked at Kevin Durant when Oklahoma City was in the finals, and
The
you
last-
look at
the last time,
right,
yeah.
and you look at when Shai is in the finals, and if you went back in the middle of the year and looked at what their values were, you probably saw a greater increase on Shai this year than you saw in Durant that year This gives you an example.
And this is a great point by Brendan Allen. Baseball is weird like that, simultaneously a team sport and an individual sport. People will follow a team or a player, and everyone has respect for an amazing player on a shit team. It's so true. I mean, that's literally the story of Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani before he went to the Dodgers.
Yeah.
I mean, and even at times there, the Angels weren't always terrible. But what was the conversation compared to the Dodgers and even compared to other teams who were on the West in both the American League and National League?
Pete Alonso is a guy that people buy in the
Right.
hobby. And Pete Alonso is giving us nothing except for some fun home run derbies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? But because he's interesting on that front, major market, that's good enough.
It'll do the rest
for
itself.
that. Right.
There you go. And as we pivot into those major markets, because again, we'll, much like the NBA, we'll be on the air again to recap this all. The puck drops between Edmonton and Florida come Wednesday. Aaron's been adamant about Florida. Apparently, a lot of people from Canada aren't as big as Gretzky fans or across the board as we like to think here in the States. He's a little bit more polarizing than I think we all realize. And I guess apparently the Edmonton Oilers are like, insert whatever American team chokes always, because everyone has a different, patsy they like to use for that, depending on what sport you're talking about. But I guess you could say that, the Edmonton Oilers are what we now view the Buffalo Bills as, or something like that. I found this out weeks ago in this very studio, or right outside the studio here at Go Live Vegas, because Aaron and Raquel basically confirmed that to me. So apparently, yeah, the Oilers aren't exactly the darlings we like to think they are.
And Aaron thinks that there's a conspiracy theory
Well,
against
that's
the Canadian
true.
team, so therefore he's going to ride whatever
isn't
U.S.
it
team.
funny how conveniently when we asked him to hop on the mic and explain said theory, it's radio silence. So okay, but either way, Aaron,
We'll see. We'll see how he talks in a week when Edmonton's down 3-1, and he's like, "Oh well, it is a theory that the refs are against him and Bateman and against him and little whatever."
So really quick though, collectively, are we all rolling with the Panthers here?
I have the Panthers. I think Panthers in 6.
Yep.
6 or 7. It's going to be a tight series.
Yeah,
It's
I think
gonna
it'll be
close.
Panthers in 6.
It's going to come down to the goaltending of Edmonton. If Skinner or what's his name can actually hold up, Bobrovsky for Florida has been a stud for the last 4 or 5 years. He's hands down probably the best goalie in the league. And now it's going to come down to if can Skinner hold up. If he can, Edmonton will make it a series.
I think it'll start off 2-2. And I think they'll split. And
I think this,
right?
and I'm with you, I think this will be much closer as far as the narrative on a day-by-day basis when you compare it to the NBA. And that's a great point, because it's very similar when the run that Tampa was going through with Vasilevsky, right?
Yeah.
And who was it? I believe Corey Crawford with Chicago even before that.
Yes.
Like when you have a guy between the posts.
Marc-Andre Fleury before that, where he won 3 in a row.
Like Pittsburgh.
Yes.
When you could put a guy between the posts who could dominate, that makes a difference, much like you mentioned with pitching in baseball, quarterbacking in football, and so on and so forth.
That's why the goalies are the superstars.
Absolutely. And baseball is where we'll wrap it up. I mean, we have such a jam-packed show. We're not even going to get to football today, but rest assured we will down the road. It's only June. And the fact, guys, it is only June, and the fact we are talking about baseball with so much vigor says a lot. Now, I get it. There's a lot to be determined, and we could sit here and do a whole show about all the teams that aren't the Dodgers or the Yankees or even the New York Mets or the Philadelphia Phillies. But Dodgers getting it done in the 3-game set against the Yankees out on the West Coast. They top them 2-1. The Yankees get the big win yesterday on Game 5. They jumped out to a huge lead, gave up 6 unanswered runs before it spiraled downhill. Game 2 was so bad, as Steve mentioned, we had Shohei Ohtani falling asleep in the dugout. It was just all kinds of bad in Game 2. But guys, when we look at this series as a whole, how likely do you think, because even before we got going, we were in spring training, everyone is just hoping, not everyone, but, across the board, I think a lot of people want to see Dodgers and Yankees again. At least I know Jimmy and myself do, but there are some teams out there in the American League and the National League that could seriously be thorns in both of their sides respectively, simply because of how they play the game, right? Who do you think really jumps out? Because I look at the Dodgers, right? What makes them so good continues to make them so good. They get on base in droves, and they know how to bring people home. What team also does that exceptionally well? Your San Diego Padres. They may not have quite the star power on paper the Dodgers do, but they play the same type of game and with the same type of consistency, right? Say what you want about the Mets being stacked on paper. Say what you want about the Phillies, having a great record. But then you flip over the American League, you have the Tigers defensively with their pitching, they're doing now.
Their pitching, hands down, is the best in baseball.
It's lockdown.
You can't hit them.
No, so
you cannot hit them.
So even with a great slugging team like New York, and great, and even in the National League, great offensive teams like the Cubs, it's like we talk about styles make fights. Everyone kind of has a little something, at least as far as the teams we just mentioned.
Terry Skubal needs to go
Yeah.
date Caitlin Clark. That's what he needs to do so we can get the Paul Skeens treatment for him. 'Cause
Right.
That guy is unhittable.
That guy is
Unhittable.
unbelievably good.
And sorry, Livy Dunn. I think Caitlin Clark will get a little bit
Yeah.
of
But that's what I'm saying.
No, but it's
No,
a
but-
great point. But of those teams, do you think there's someone who could throw a wrench in all this? How likely do you think Dodgers and Yankees see each other in October?
Padres are built to beat the Dodgers.
Totally.
Because what they did was they loaded the bullpen
Yeah.
to be able to shut them down late, which is going to be some of the back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is going to be is can the Padres pick up another frontline starter
Yes.
to allow them to sustain through the rest of the season?
Yes.
I think in the American League, there's actually a disruptor that we're not generally going to talk about, but if you start looking at what this team's doing, how they're built and where they're going to go and what they have, I wouldn't be surprised if they became a problem for the Yankees, and that's the Mariners. The Mariners can pitch, and the Mariners will pitch. And the Mariners, when they're healthy,
They're young and
are going to do
talented.
really well. And
Yeah.
they've got assets to move in their farm system to be able to acquire some of these arms that they're going to need in the playoffs.
And I know
right?
you have a comment on that
Okay.
as Brendan Allen chimes in. Ahem.
Well, and Brendan Allen wants to bring up the Giants, and I hate to tell you, but after the All-Star break, we'll be talking about the Giants being the fourth best team in that division because the Diamondbacks will be that much better. Because the Diamondbacks will be a very aggressive team at the trade
And
deadline.
that was gonna be my next
because they
question.
are another loaded franchise.
yes.
That they just
That's a
brought.
good team
Think
in
about
Arizona.
this.
Really good, yeah.
They just brought up Jordan Lawler. They just brought him up because they didn't need to, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about what the Diamondbacks have to play with and move, they're a team that could be a little quirky. But I'm going to tell you that I believe the Mariners are actually a team that are going to be very disruptive come late in the season, and I think that's going to be a problem. Two, the Yankees, their division, it's not about how good the teams are in their division. It's about how well those teams play at home in their
Yeah.
division, right? And unfortunately, Red Sox play really well at home. Toronto has a tendency to be pretty pesky at home, right? They just don't play very well on the road.
Right.
Right? So those teams I think will do well. And then in the National League, the Mets, their pitching gets a little bit better. And again, they're a team that's not afraid to make a big move.
Which, and I think they likely
Right?
will. Yeah.
And I think that
Help
they
with the
will.
staff.
And it'll be something where people will be like, what? Right? Because they're just going to go all in. So I think that they're a team that could do that. And I keep bringing it up. Look, Milwaukee's pesky all the time. Milwaukee's always that. The Chicago Cubs are a
Bingo.
very interesting team.
And that when they're on fire, that is the best offense in baseball. Their run differential will blow your mind. And on a day where they're off, you may think, who the hell are these guys? When they are on, that is a
They're
team.
putting up a 9.
They
It's
are a
insane.
team
You
that
do
is
not want to
in the
play them.
discussion,
Yes.
right, for Corbin Burns.
Yeah.
And he could be a guy that...
And he's a difference maker.
Right? And then you've got a couple other arms that are coming up with your contracts that could be available, and you've got teams like that. Again, you have to, in baseball, over any other sport in baseball, if you don't look down what a team has in their farm system,
It's everything.
you're not forecasting well enough for that team, because you can look year after year and you can see teams that at the trade deadline that move assets that make huge splashes, right? Look, Washington is a much more formidable team right now than they were 4 years ago with Juan Soto.
Yeah.
And why?
And they won the World Series.
Because they went and they acquired all of this deep talent.
Yeah.
Robert Hassel just came up.
Yeah.
Right? Just
James
came
Wood
up.
is a stud.
James Wood is incredible.
Yeah.
Obviously, C.J. Abrams showed that he is an everyday shortstop in Major League Baseball, right? Mackenzie Gore shows that he's a frontline pitcher, and these are all guys that came from the Padres for Juan Soto. So when you start looking at what teams can do at the trade deadline from one side to another, that will really start to, show and impress that. And you've got some teams out there that have some pieces that could get moved that could be, surprising. And look, Texas is one of those teams. DeGrom's healthy, probably showing he's worth every dollar that he's worth again. Could you see Texas move DeGrom? I do.
And I love that you bring up the prospects, because even with our Yankees, I mean, look at the key contributors right off the bat who weren't even in the conversation, weren't even in the lineup in October as recently as we saw them when they were competing for a World Series. Jason Dominguez, Ben Rice, look at how that's paying dividends. It's early, but we talk so much about the prospects of the teams in the Yankees division, right? We thought Baltimore was going to be a huge threat because of their farm system. But it's those big market teams that show that, if we have the money to spend, we will bring in a big trade, a guy at the trade deadline, or we'll have a big offseason where we stack things out like the Dodgers or the Mets do. But time and time again, it's the homegrown talent, Jimmy. It really is.
And that happens for all the good teams. You look at their farm systems; they
Forever.
continue. Yes,
For the history of baseball.
The good teams, they continue to build. They continue to build through their farm, and that's how they do. 2 weeks ago, we did the divisional winners for the NFL.
That's
I pulled it up.
Let's wrap up the show.
The show.
Perfect.
Going with divisional winners for baseball.
Before we do that, two baseball things really quick before we get into that.
I was gonna say,
one, I just
please.
wanted to bring up. What a great baseball moment with Ellie De La Cruz when his sister passed from being terminal with cancer and goes up there and hits the home run.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what a great
Baseball
moment.
does that for you, though.
Because
it's so good.
How can you not be romantic about it, right?
Well, and the thing was, with that player, all we see is when he's loud, aggressive, all of this. So to actually see him humanized, I think was really, really great for the sport. And then also at the same time, it's just a great moment in baseball. And then two, I hope everybody has their seatbelts on because Caglianone just got pulled up by Kansas City. And you're now going to see a generational power hitter that, in my opinion, I've seen some people making the Bryce Harper comparison. I would probably go, I don't know that he's going to hit for an average like Bryce will, right? I think he's going to be more like a 250 hitter. But he is one of those guys that is going to launch moonshot after moonshot, and you're going to start seeing that highlight come out of Kauffman Stadium there.
Wow.
And when that happens, this kid is a bona fide superstar. He is someone that you absolutely, and yes, his cards are absolutely too high right now, but you still probably need to pick one up if you don't have one in your collection.
That Royals team's got some good
There's
talent
some very good talent on it, and there's even more down the line for them. But they're going to
and
him.
Speaking of talent, and I love that you bring that up because it's spot on with Ellie. Baseball, sports in general, human interest stories are great, but just like you said, Jimmy, sometimes it just feels a little bit different. It hits a little bit harder in baseball. So an outstanding story, one of the game's best. It's heartbreaking, but it's great to see that at the very least. You know, it's kind of hard to put a positive spin on it, but you like to see something that isn't as dark and as negative, given it's what that player had to go through. So any little glimmer of, silver lining, glimmer, hope you can find, that's what you want to get. Great question really quick before we get into our divisional picks. This is from Michael Lugo again. Question about farm players. Do they get cards right off the bat? Do they wait till they come up, or do they wait till next year for them to get a card?
So it's real simple. The Bowman First card comes out as soon as you get drafted into MLB. You'll get a Bowman First card. Most of the times you'll get a Bowman First, and then you won't see his rookie card come out until he plays at least 60% of the games. So he has to come into the league, play 60%, then the following year you'll see rookie cards come out with his name on it. Everything in between that's called a prospect card. A lot of people don't like to buy the prospects. They're only buying the Bowman First cards, or they wait and pick up the first rookie card of that player. But the Bowman First obviously is the one that you want. However, those could get a little pricey, especially if he's colored and autoed and all that
your
stuff.
investment opportunities in that side, from my opinion, when you get a guy that's closer, say like the Caglianone, I would even argue the DeVries at this point for the Padres, right? Like guys that are kind of like the next up. Marcelo Meyer just came up finally, right? So when you talk about these guys, their prospect autos were probably the area for investment because it's an auto that guys can afford, right? And at least it's an auto of like early for him rather than that first or the rookie auto, because those two have the tendency to be the highest pieces, but those ones at least have a little bit of growth room in them.
Right.
Whereas sometimes you're buying, like right now, if you go out and you buy a Caglianone first auto, you're paying probably the max you're going to pay for that card.
Yeah, it's never going to be higher unless he goes on to like the Hall of Fame.
Or
but
you're
paying
lucky,
the highest you're going to pay right now.
You get lucky in situations, say like with Holiday and the Orioles, right? He didn't start off well. His stuff took a dip. Now they're not playing well. His stuff is kind of simmered.
Now you can buy him.
Now you can buy Holiday right
Yes.
now, knowing that 3 or 4 years from now, but you're going to have to hold.
Right.
3 or 4 years from now, you're going to see that really pick up. It happened with Witt. Bobby Witt was not the most bought player in that product to start with.
Yeah.
But once he sustained that he was going to be a runner at the MVP multiple times, that then gave you that ability. Not often does that happen.
So it just goes to show that so often being early, recognizing the potential value and getting your investment in at a timely fashion.
Buy Roman Anthony today. Go out and buy Roman Anthony first today, because here, right about the All-Star break, Roman Anthony is going to be an everyday player for the Boston Red Sox. Major market. He's a good player. He's flashy. He's fun. And he talks crap. So those all matter when he goes to a team that's like that. That's what you want to forecast when you're buying these prospects coming into Major League Baseball. Whereas in the NFL, you're actually waiting for the guy to show a little glimpse.
Right.
Then you buy. Then he has 2 or 3 games. Then it pops.
And see that anyone out there watching, listening on any of our social media platforms, our digital platforms, get a notepad out and start jotting this down, because these are the type of insights you want for the hobby. Great question, Michael Lugo. And for any of you out there who do have more questions, keep throwing them our way, because they will be answered. Rest assured, with these two guys to my left and my right, they know what they're talking about. But Jimmy, obviously, it's not just the hobby, the card collecting hobby we like to dabble in. We like gambling as well. So to wrap things up, we dove into the NFL, our divisional winners, our way too early predictions. This not as early as we're focused on Major League Baseball before the All-Star break. So if we're going to hammer down on some divisional winners, let's do it.
Yeah, because there's going to be some of these teams that are like minus 3,000.
Right.
Like the Dodgers are probably going to be very favored. I think
there's no value.
Most of us are going to pick them to win the division. So let's run down them real quick, and let's see. I want to see your guys' opinions on this. Our American League Central. This one's kind of. I was shocked when I saw this. Detroit Tigers, minus 500 to win the division. Then you have the Twins, the Guardians, Royals, and White Sox. Do you feel that any of those other teams, besides the Tigers, can come back and win this division?
I think the Guardians are really, really good. I just think the Tigers are better, so I still think the Tigers win the Central. If the Tigers weren't as good, though, I'd think, but I guess if they weren't as good, the Guardians would be, slated a little higher. But I like the Guardians more than I like Minnesota.
At plus 1,200 for the Guardians?
That's great value. That's incredible value. They were there last year, and I do like them more than the Twins.
I like Minnesota better here. The only reason I like Minnesota is because Minnesota generally plays better after the All-Star break. That's just traditional.
Last year they did, especially.
And part of that is because at home, they're not playing in the elements as often. So therefore, I think that benefits them heavily, right? 2, little things in baseball matter. Guys don't realize this, but when you live in an area, right? This is why Yankees, you can't live 15 miles away from Yankee Stadium if you're a Yankee player.
Yeah.
Your travel time's way too long.
Yep. They want you in the vicinity.
So when you live close, and in Minnesota, because it's so spread out, those players have a tendency to live pretty close.
Yeah.
Right? So that does matter, because your day, the easier day is a little bit better. So those things I think are very important. So I lean a little bit more to Minnesota here, but my belief is,
do we all think the Tigers
win that division?
No doubt. When it's all said and done,
because I think that pitching staff is just way.
And it's an incredible story from baseball, from worst to first type scenario.
Absolutely.
And then so let's go to the American League East. Yankees, Blue Jays, Rays, Red Sox, Orioles. I think we all think the Yankees are probably going to...
Same type of thing.
Okay.
Yep, for much different reasons. Detroit, but the similar premise in the fact they're so dominant, just so much better than
now, this one's up in the air. This is a discussion. Mariners, Astros, Rangers, Angels, Athletics. Athletics, out. Yep. Angels, out. Rangers,
But those top 2,
Rangers, Astros, Mariners, I think all can still have a chance to win this division.
And Texas still has a very good team on
the Rangers are going to have to move a big piece and bring their big issues back to them. And they've got some glaring issues. They've got some problems in the infield. They've got some problems in the outfield. And they are not good in the middle innings. And to be able to get those middle inning relievers,
especially through July. July's the worst.
That's always
They're going to
worst.
have to move someone that's really big. I don't think Texas is ready for that. I think Texas is now, based on the roster today that they are, I believe Texas is another year away.
Okay, Mariners or Astros.
The
so I think the Mariners win this, but I think it comes down to the last week, 10 days of the season to determine which one of those teams wins that division.
I'm with them. I actually think when it's all said and done, the division race in this one could be the closest, and I think Houston could just as easily do it. But right now, for the sake of what we're doing, I'm going to go with Seattle.
All right, let's go.
So it's chalk heavy, but we'll go with Seattle.
National League Central, one we already talked about. We got the Cubs, Cardinals, Brewers. We're leaving out the Reds and Pirates because they have no chance.
Yep.
So we have the Cubs, Cardinals, or Brewers. Who you guys got?
It's hard for me not to go with Chicago. Again, I know I'm eating chalk, but mostly just because when they get going, it's like what we talked about with Oklahoma City and Indiana offensively in basketball. When you have an absolute juggernaut who can just start blasting balls.
And their pitching staff's not bad.
Not at all. And again, it's one of those things, when they beat you, they massacre you. So even in the grand scheme of things, they may not really be a contender in the same way the Mets, Phillies, Dodgers, Padres are in the National League. Give me them to win the Central.
Is Pete Crow Armstrong becoming Ellie De La Cruz? I think he's starting to become that type of
He's the number one
fanfare type
player asked for. People come into the shop,
Really?
he's the
Yeah.
number one
Is he
player
really?
that people are
and he
asking for
should have
right
been.
now.
And and Jimmy knows this. I used to do a baseball singles stream where we sold prospects and everything.
Yeah.
And Pete Crow Armstrong was the number one guy. I kept telling everybody, buy him, buy him, buy him, buy him, buy him.
You talked about him this offseason.
He is just, he's a guy that is good on all the aspects. But here's where I think the difference in this is. Of those three teams, right? Who has the arm that can win a game independently to stop a slide? And Shota's the only arm I can think of that stands out.
There's nobody standing out on the Cardinals and nobody standing out on the Brewers in my eyes that can actually
No one
do that.
is a long negative run guy. Shota's that guy. I think Shota could go out and just be like, look, I don't care what the pitch count is. I'm throwing a complete game. I'm shutting it down. I'm freeing up the bullpen. I'm doing that. I think he's that guy. And so I think that ultimately is going to be the thing for them. Health is going to be a major, major thing here. And look, the Cubs have not proven they can remain healthy, and that is a problem.
And this going on to the next division, because I think we're all taking the Cubs,
we're
right?
taking Chicago.
Yep.
Okay, so the next one, I think this is the toughest division to pick in all of baseball.
The West?
The National League East.
I love it.
Yep.
With the Phillies, Mets, and Braves.
Yeah.
It's down to those three teams.
And the Braves are starting to
Come along.
How
They
come?
were 8 games under 500.
Well,
now they're over.
Well, health has a lot to do with
Spencer
it.
Strider's back.
Yeah, it's health.
Acuna's back.
Acuna from the get-go.
Ozuna isn't fighting a hamstring.
Yep.
You're getting such juicy odds, too, with Atlanta.
well,
They're
that's-
plus 910.
And that's what I was going to ask. Like, they has to be a great number that will start to dwindle
Oh,
because
yeah.
they're going to get better.
By the end of the year, you're going
I
to see
have-
them at plus 200, plus 100
I
towards the end of the year.
Exactly.
One name that I'm going to bring up, and I don't know that there's another team in baseball that can bring up one individual player that would do
Make
this
that much
in
of a
my
difference.
mind.
Yeah.
Andrew Painter for the Phillies. When they bring him up this year, they will have a bona fide 1A immediately come in to their pitching rotation. And when they do that, that is going to be the difference in their run. He reminds me of Mike Mussina when Mussina came up. And I wouldn't be surprised if Painter comes up and rolls off an 8-1, 9-2 record, something like that.
Yeah.
And just really, really blows
Especially
it out
when
of the
those
water.
rookies come in, because the hitters haven't seen them.
Right.
They don't have, the coaching staff doesn't have, you have the minor league stuff, but you're not throwing the same in the minors as you are in the
He
majors.
is,
There's no
he
scout-
is a
no scout
legit
report.
3-pitch pitcher with 2 very good additional pitches. So he is a guy that I think could really, really change that division on his own. I don't see it with the Braves. I think the Braves are a great story. I think it would be fun to watch the Braves and Mets fight for a playoff series,
that'd be awesome.
a wild card spot. And we both know that there will maybe be one available there, maybe none.
Right.
To those two teams.
So who you taking
I was
in
going to
this?
say, Jimmy, what is the mark
I'm
right
taking
now
the
for,
Phillies.
What's the mark right now for Philadelphia, too?
Minus 115.
Okay, the Mets are at what?
Plus 110.
Okay, wow.
I have the Phillies.
I believe it's the Phillies because I do believe the Phillies are a little bit. I like across the board. I like their lineup. It feels a little bit more fleshed out. Mets are a little bit more top heavy, but it's tough with those odds because, like you said, it's probably the toughest to call. The odds reflect that. Although I'm very interested as we wrap things up. Obviously, the Dodgers are going to get the chalk, but what are the Padres at right now in the West?
Padres, you're getting them at a plus 1,000
Oh my God!
to win the West.
Do you know why?
How many games are they back? 2?
Yeah, I think so. I got the.
Do you know why that is?
No.
Because
They're back 3 games
They
right now
are-
as of the past series.
they are
with the
injured,
Dodgers.
and the Padres are going to have to make a couple of moves here in trades. And the one that stands out, and this is the one that I think happens, and if this deal gets done, then look, and I'm a little bit of a homer here, but I'm not. Look, I appreciate the Dodgers for who they are. Like, as much as I don't like that team, I dislike the Giants so much more than I dislike the Dodgers. As weird as that sounds.
And the Dodgers, say what you want.
Because it's fun to watch.
And they play a
right?
great brand of baseball. Like,
But-
the Dodgers do it how you buy the book right now. We're really in the
If
history
the
of the game,
Padres
are supposed to do it.
acquire Reynolds from the Pirates, which
Yeah.
is what I think is going to happen, then I believe the Padres will have enough depth in their hitting lineup to be able to do that, and that will help their pitching staff out on the back end of games.
So are we taking the Dodgers out? That's what I'm asking you.
Oh, man,
It's
that's
very
so-
hard to
that's
do.
so-
I don't see them losing this division.
And here's what- 'cause
however, I would like to see them lose the division.
Oh, me
but
too.
I just don't see them doing it.
And much like your guys' background is in the trading card industry, I have a background with the handicapping. I will always say, do not let the shiny odds, the value associated with a team distract you from the fact they are not the best team. The Padres are the best equipped team in the National League to beat the Dodgers, as we mentioned, hands down. But until it happens, it's just too hard to bet against
What the
Dodgers.
Dodgers don't want is the Padres to get the first wild card. That's what they don't want.
Yes.
Because if the
way
Padres
it
get the
seeds
first
out.
wild card
Yes.
and how it seeds out,
Yes.
then they wouldn't be playing until the CS.
And you don't
right?
want that.
And that is definitely what they don't want, right? They do not want that.
Timing is
Because
everything.
look, the Padres are set up with enough front arms that they got guys that could go out there. Like Dylan Cease is hot and cold because of the type pitcher he is. But he's a guy that could go out there on any given day and throw a one-hitter.
And
Sure,
how
and they-
hard
the-
they're hitting it.
the
and like,
PS
and they're talking about getting hit by a truck at 90 miles an hour is the equivalent.
So I
yeah.
like that Steve brought that up because it's kind of alludes to the fact that this show tapped into studies and elements of research that are now very common, but like you said, Jimmy, at the time weren't common. So that's very much the legacy of John Brinkus and sports science. But again, Brinks TV, very successful production company, did a lot of stuff as far as innovation with science and the media and analytics and competitive athletics. Really wore a lot of hats and did them all very well. The most heartbreaking thing about this really is that it all comes as a result of him losing his bout with depression. His family made that clear in a statement. And obviously, we're not going to sit here and go on a diatribe about it. But look, if you're struggling, if you need the help, go get the help.
Yeah.
John Brinkus, gone at 54. He will be missed. Certainly won't be forgotten. And as sad as it is, it's moments like this that make you reflect, not just on a great life and a great career, but on how maybe it could have gone different if, some things had gone different. So you can do that for yourself by getting yourself the help that you need. don't be afraid to do so. It is always out there. So by all means, really quick, Aaron, there is one more comment from Michael Lugo, who has really been the fourth member of the show today.
Yeah,
I want
buddy.
to jump this up, though, or throw this up on the screen, because he just did another break last night on his social media page. He loves the sports card, but he really loves the Pokemon element as well. So he says, side note, before you guys close it out, another full deck from the shop last week. Game Day Sports Cards helping me kill it with the Pokemon. He's all in. So, Jimmy, he
Let's
loves,
go, my
he-
guy,
he-
Michael.
He loves everything you guys got going on the sports front, on the Pokemon
Appreciate you,
front.
buddy.
He
Thank
said
you.
He's yet to check out the one, because he's a huge comic book pop culture nerd as well. So I told him he's got to go check out One of Us Comics as well, Steve. So whatever, and if you guys are out there watching, listening, you guys can do the same. Jimmy, really quick though, for the audience who's not as informed or tuned in as about the locations, you guys have a new one out.
Yep, we got a new store open in 215 in Rainbow. It's
Ooh,
going to
great location.
open this weekend. June 7th is going to be the grand opening over there. Maverick and the boys have done a great job. So I know Steve's been over there. Everybody's been over there helping him out, getting it up and going. And so this weekend, June 7th, come check it out.
Definitely plan to support, guys. They're doing
Yeah.
a nice job over there. And what I love about it, and this is, I just want to share this really
Please,
quick. And
absolutely.
if you get a chance, go onto the Game Day social media and see what Brian from Talent Sports
he did a really cool video.
Because Brian, and I posted it on my page, is that was a legendary move. At the Front Row Card Show, Maverick went to go ask him, like, hey, look, I've got a new shop opening. Would you mind saying something? You're one of my favorite influencers type thing.
Right.
But then he wanted to do a deal with him on some cards. And Brian actually reached in and said, hey, look, my dad and I collected together. We still collect together. Cristobal and Maverick collect together. And Maverick, what is he, 14, 13,
Yeah, 13,
right?
yeah.
And that kid is the one leading this conversation. Brian reaches into his case, pulls out $500 in cards and says, hey, I'm just going to give these to you for your shop because I like how you're doing this. That's how you grow the hobby with these young kids, is you give them experiences that they're going to look back upon and never forget. That kid will never forget what Brian did for him before his shop opened.
Wow.
I promise you.
And it all goes back full circle, right? Especially in a town like Vegas, and especially in the sports world and the collector's world. Really quick, a follow-up question from Lugo. What time on Saturday, Jimmy? Because he says
10 a.m.
He will
10
be there.
a.m.
So 10 a.m. There you go, Lugo. And it's 215 Rainbow.
215 in
Off
Rainbow.
and run in the Spring Valley, the Southwest location. It's great. And of course, you could always check them out at the One of Us Comics front as well.
Yep.
Festivities for First Friday going down this week.
Well, actually, today you can go down there,
Ooh, sweet.
and at 4:00, Sick Rick Masks is going to be at the downtown location. Very, very cool. You got to go check that out. Then, of course, you've got First Friday, which is just the big hubbub, everything
Always.
happening down
Yep.
there. So make sure you make your way down there as well. And then at the Henderson store, we've been loading up on Pokemon. So it is
There you go,
Pokemon
like
time.
Lugo.
Come get Pokemon, Japanese, English stuff, Destined Rivals in stock, all of that stuff available now. So come on down, check it out. And I know Game Day's loaded with it as well, so make sure you do that.
And of course, this is the show for all the insights. There was a lot of great card analysis and really just market breakdown of everything related to the hobby. I'm learning as we go along, so it's been awesome to co-host this show with these two industry insiders next to me. So great stuff, and of course, we'll continue to talk about all the major talking points throughout, really not just the NBA and the Stanley Cup playoffs, but throughout all the dog days of summer. It'll never be a dormant time in the sports calendar right here on the Game Day Huddle. So be sure to, yeah, right. Hey, it's going to be interesting, no doubt. Jimmy, get those bets in. So like,
We're in.
subscribe. I love it. Follow us. Be sure to join in the conversation as well when we do it all over again next time, where you could catch us right here on Go Live Vegas. It's the Game Day Huddle. You guys have a good one.